Somewhere between a gravel road in the mountains and a highway at 2 in the morning, there is a motorcycle that BMW built to answer one question: can a machine be your daily commuter, your weekend escape, and your adventure partner across 3 continents, all at once? Today we are opening up that machine piece by piece, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly why thousands of riders are either falling in love with it, or walking away disappointed. Stay with me, because what happens in the middle of this story might completely change your mind. Before we go any further, if you are someone who genuinely loves motorcycles, real riding stories, and honest reviews without any sugarcoating, then you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. I am talking about Bikes Review Lab, and if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because we are about to go deep into the BMW F900 GS, and trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. Also drop a like if you are ready for this ride, it genuinely helps this channel grow. Now let's get into it. Rally and race history. Let's start with something most people skip: the racing blood hiding inside this machine. BMW's GS lineup did not appear out of nowhere. It was born on the dirt of the Dakar Rally, one of the toughest endurance races on the planet, where riders pushed through deserts, dunes, and brutal terrain for days without rest. The GS badge itself carries decades of history from BMW's larger adventure bikes conquering Dakar stages back in the 80s, proving that big, powerful bikes could survive sand dunes and rocky terrain that would break lesser machines. The F900 GS is a newer, mid-weight member of that same bloodline, and while it has not personally stood on a Dakar podium, it inherits the DNA, the suspension philosophy, and the off-road confidence that came from those brutal races. Engineers who worked on the bigger GS race bikes carried their knowledge straight into this smaller, more accessible platform, which means every rider, not just factory racers, gets a taste of that heritage. So when you throw a leg over this bike, you are sitting on decades of desert-proven engineering, even if the badge on the tank is fresh out of the factory. Engine performance and power delivery. Now let's talk about what actually moves this thing forward, because this is where the story gets interesting. The F900 GS runs a liquid-cooled, 895cc parallel twin engine, and it produces around 105 horsepower, paired with roughly 77 Nm of torque. What makes this engine special is not just the numbers, it is how the power actually arrives underneath you. BMW tuned this motor with an uneven firing order, which gives it a growl and a pulse similar to a V-twin, instead of feeling flat and clinical like a typical parallel twin. In real riding, this means strong mid-range punch when you twist the throttle out of a corner, and enough top-end pull to overtake comfortably on a highway without downshifting 3 gears first. Roll on the throttle in 3rd gear and you can feel the engine breathe, building power in a smooth, linear wave rather than an abrupt, nervous surge. It is not a bike that will scare a beginner, but it definitely rewards an experienced rider who wants to push it hard, and that duality is exactly why this engine has earned so much praise from reviewers around the world. Cylinder configuration and engine design. Diving a little deeper into the mechanical side, this parallel twin layout is lighter and more compact than BMW's older boxer engines, which actually helps with the bike's balance, something we will talk about more in a bit. The engine sits with a 360-degree crank feel tuned to behave differently, giving that characteristic BMW rumble rather than a buzzy inline feel. This design choice was intentional, because a mid-size adventure bike needs an engine that is compact enough to keep the center of gravity low, especially when you are standing on the pegs, navigating a rocky trail with your body weight shifting constantly. Fuel efficiency in real-world riding. Here is something practical that riders care about deeply: the mileage. On paper, manufacturers always paint a rosy picture, but real-world testing puts the F900 GS somewhere between 18 to 22 km per liter, depending on how aggressively you ride and whether you are cruising on highways or grinding through city traffic. If you keep a steady throttle hand on long touring stretches, you can even push slightly beyond that number. It is not the most frugal bike in its class, but considering the performance on tap, this is a fair and honest trade-off that most owners are happy to accept. Power-to-weight ratio. Now this is where the F900 GS starts to shine in a way that numbers alone cannot fully explain. With a dry weight hovering around 212 kilograms, and over 100 horsepower on tap, this bike delivers one of the best power-to-weight ratios in the mid-size adventure segment. What that translates to on the road is quick acceleration, confident overtaking, and a bike that never feels like it is struggling under its own mass, even when loaded with luggage for a long trip. Gear shifting and clutch feel. Let's talk about something riders notice within the first 5 minutes of riding: the gearbox. The 6-speed transmission on the F900 GS feels precise, with short, positive throws between gears, and BMW has clearly worked on refining the clutch feel to be light enough for stop-and-go city traffic, yet firm enough to trust during aggressive off-road shifts. Higher trims even offer an optional up-and-down quickshifter, which, once you try it, becomes almost impossible to live without, because it lets you shift clean through the gears without ever touching the clutch lever. Suspension setup front and rear. Now here comes one of the most important parts of any adventure bike, the suspension, because this is often the difference between a machine you trust and one you fear. The F900 GS comes with a fully adjustable front fork offering around 230 mm of travel, and a rear shock with similar travel, tuned specifically to absorb hard hits from rocks, ruts, and uneven trails without rattling your spine. In the real world, this suspension feels plush on broken tarmac, forgiving on gravel, and surprisingly composed even when you hit a pothole you did not see coming until it was already under your front wheel. On tighter, twisty roads, it holds the bike steady without excessive dive under braking, which builds a lot of rider confidence, especially for someone still learning to trust a big adventure bike in corners. Riders who have taken this bike through washboard dirt roads describe the rear shock soaking up chatter that would normally shake a lesser bike apart, and that composure is exactly what keeps riders relaxed on long, rough stretches. Braking system and safety. Moving to something that genuinely saves lives, the braking package. The F900 GS uses radial-mounted front brake calipers paired with large discs, giving strong, progressive stopping power that bites hard when you need it and stays gentle when you just want to scrub off a little speed. But the real highlight here is BMW's electronics, specifically cornering ABS, which allows the bike to brake safely even while leaned over in a turn, something that used to be nearly impossible on motorcycles just a decade ago and would have ended in a crash on older machines. There is also an off-road ABS mode that reduces intervention on loose surfaces, letting experienced riders slide the rear wheel slightly for better control on dirt, which is exactly what off-road purists want, since full ABS intervention on gravel can actually make stopping distances longer, not shorter. Ergonomics and riding posture. Now let's talk comfort, because this is where a lot of riders either fall in love or start having second thoughts, and it usually happens the very first time they swing a leg over the bike in a parking lot. The seat height sits around 850 mm, which can feel tall for shorter riders, though BMW does offer a lower seat option along with a lowering suspension kit for accessibility. The handlebar position is upright and natural, designed specifically for standing while riding off-road, which reduces strain on your wrists and shoulders during long adventure stretches, letting you stand comfortably for kilometers without your lower back screaming at you. For taller riders, this ergonomic layout feels like it was built specifically for them, but shorter riders may need to plant just one foot down at a stop, which takes some getting used to, especially on uneven or sloped ground where confidence at a standstill really matters. Weight and weight distribution. Circling back to weight, because it matters so much on an adventure bike, the F900 GS keeps its mass centered low and close to the rider, thanks to that compact parallel twin engine we discussed earlier. This means even though the bike weighs over 200 kilograms, it never feels top-heavy, whether you are navigating a slow, technical off-road section or leaning into a fast highway curve. Compared to some heavier adventure bikes in its class, this one feels noticeably easier to manage at walking speed, which honestly makes a huge difference for new adventure riders. Ground clearance and off-road capability. Now for the dirt lovers watching this, here is what you have been waiting for. The F900 GS offers a generous ground clearance of around 240 mm, allowing it to clear rocks, roots, and uneven terrain without constantly scraping the underbelly or forcing you to pick an awkward line around every obstacle. Combined with long travel suspension and a proper off-road tire option, this bike genuinely earns its GS badge the moment the tarmac ends and the trail begins. It will not outperform a dedicated enduro bike on extreme technical trails full of deep ruts and steep rocky climbs, but for the 90% of adventure riders who explore fire roads, gravel paths, and moderate off-road trails on their weekend escapes, this bike delivers serious, trustworthy capability without demanding years of dirt riding experience first. Tire grip and handling. Handling on this bike genuinely surprises people the first time they ride it, because it does not feel like a tall, top-heavy adventure bike the way you might expect. On tarmac, the chassis feels sharp and communicative, giving you confidence to lean into corners at speed and trust exactly what the front tire is telling you. Switch to a gravel road, and the wider handlebar combined with responsive front-end feedback lets you correct slides quickly, almost instinctively, before they turn into a scary moment. A lot of this comes down to tire choice, since the stock tires are more road-biased for everyday comfort, so riders planning serious off-road trips often swap to a proper knobby tire for better grip in mud and loose dirt, and once you make that swap, the bike genuinely transforms into a different animal off the beaten path. Highway performance and touring comfort. Let's shift gears and talk about long-distance touring, because this is where the F900 GS proves it is not just a dirt bike wearing a costume for the camera. On the highway, the engine settles into a relaxed cruising RPM, the windscreen deflects a decent amount of wind away from your chest and helmet, and the seating position keeps your back naturally upright, reducing fatigue over long hours in the saddle. Riders who have taken this bike on multi-day tours across mountains and highways report that after 4 to 5 hours of continuous riding, discomfort is minimal, especially with the optional comfort seat upgrade and the adjustable windscreen fitted in its taller position. Cruise control on higher trims makes those long, boring highway stretches far less tiring, letting you relax your right wrist and simply enjoy the scenery rolling past. Features electronics and riding modes. Now here is where BMW genuinely flexes its technological muscle, and honestly, this is the part that makes the F900 GS feel like it is from a class above its price tag. The bike comes loaded with multiple riding modes, including road, rain, and enduro settings, each adjusting throttle response, traction control, and ABS behavior to match the terrain under your wheels. There is a full-color TFT dashboard that is easy to read even in bright sunlight, optional connectivity for phone pairing and turn-by-turn navigation, and even adaptive cruise control on higher trims, a feature almost unheard of in this price bracket just a few years ago. For riders who love gadgets and safety nets, this bike genuinely impresses, and it makes older adventure bikes from a decade ago feel like they belong in a museum by comparison. Fuel tank capacity and range. Adventure riding is nothing without range, and the F900 GS carries a fuel tank of around 15 liters. Combined with its real-world mileage numbers we discussed earlier, this gives you a comfortable range of roughly 250 to 300 kilometers before you need to refuel, which is honestly reasonable for a bike in this segment, though touring purists riding through remote areas might wish for a slightly bigger tank so they could skip one extra fuel stop on those long, empty stretches. Build quality, durability and reliability. When it comes to long-term durability, BMW has generally built a strong reputation, and the F900 GS follows the tradition with solid fit and finish, quality switchgear, and components that feel like they are built to survive rough conditions. That said, no bike is perfect, and some owners have reported minor electronic sensor glitches in the first year of ownership, along with occasional issues with certain plastic panels cracking after repeated off-road drops. Nothing catastrophic, but worth mentioning for a balanced review. Maintenance cost and after-sales service. Here is the honest, slightly less glamorous side of owning a BMW. Maintenance costs on this bike run noticeably higher than Japanese competitors, partly due to specialized parts and partly due to dealership labor rates. Service intervals are reasonable, but if something outside routine maintenance breaks, expect to pay a premium for genuine parts. BMW's after-sales network has improved significantly in many countries, but availability of certain spare parts in smaller cities can sometimes cause frustrating delays. Price and value for money. Now let's talk numbers, because at the end of the day, this decides who actually buys the bike. The F900 GS sits in a premium midweight adventure category, priced higher than many Japanese rivals with similar specifications, and once you add luggage, a bigger screen, or the electronics package, the final on-road price climbs even further. However, when you factor in the badge, the technology, the build quality, and the resale value BMW motorcycles typically hold in the used market, many owners genuinely feel the price is justified over the years they keep the bike. It is not the cheapest option in its class, and a budget-conscious rider might find better value elsewhere, but it rarely feels overpriced once you actually throw a leg over it and ride away. Brand reputation and rider community. BMW's GS family carries a legendary status in the adventure riding world, largely thanks to the bigger GS models being featured in famous long-distance journeys and documentaries that inspired an entire generation of riders to quit their desk jobs and explore the world on two wheels. This reputation trickles down to the F900 GS, giving new owners instant access to a passionate, supportive global community of GS riders, group rides, meetups, and online forums filled with genuine enthusiasts ready to help each other out with advice, spare parts, and route recommendations for the next big trip. Final verdict: who should buy this? So who is this bike really for? If you are someone who wants one motorcycle that can comfortably handle your daily commute, conquer a weekend gravel trail, and still take you on a 1,000-kilometer highway tour without complaining, the F900 GS makes a very strong case for itself. It is not perfect, the maintenance costs are higher, the seat height might challenge shorter riders, and hardcore off-road purists might eventually want something more specialized. But for the vast majority of adventure riders seeking one capable, comfortable, technology-rich machine, this bike genuinely delivers. Emotional closing. At the end of the day, choosing a motorcycle is never just about numbers on a spec sheet, it is about the roads you dream of riding, the trails you want to explore, and the person you become every time you twist that throttle and leave your worries behind. The BMW F900 GS is not just a machine, it is an invitation to go further than you thought possible. So here is what I want from you: drop a comment right now and tell me, would you choose the F900 GS, or is there another adventure bike that has already stolen your heart? I read every single comment, and I would genuinely love to know your answer. If this video gave you value, hit like, subscribe to Bikes Review Lab, and I will see you in the next one.